Welcome friends. Today we will be talking about the core essence of Amrit Bindu Upanishads, which is one of the 5 of the Bindu Upanishads, the minor Upanishads. As you know, Upanishads are the distilled Vedic information composed by a constellation of Vedic rishis that has been written down for our understanding of self, understanding of the universe or Brahman. And a lot of times Amrit Bindu, although it is a very small Upanishad, it has been cross-referenced in the Bhagavad Gita frequently. So let's see what Amrit Bindu Upanishad has to say. So first of all, the word Amrit Bindu signifies the drop of immortality. It could represent the drop of immortality as the word Om, which is the conduit between the Atman and the Brahman, or the drop of immortality on recognizing the self as part of the Brahman. So it plays a very strong correlation upon the way we perceive and use the mind. So according to Amrit Bindu Upanishad, mind is the cause of everything, whether it is the cause of entanglement or freedom. Man hi manushya nam karan bandh mokshayo bandhai vishaya asaktam muktam nirvishayam smratam, which means man, and I will draw it as the mind here for correlation. This can be thought as the mind. So man, this can have 2 distinct ways in which it is working in the world, and most commonly we know it as the mode of entanglement when it is said to be impure, or the mode of moksha or liberation when it is said to be pure. So how do we distinguish whether our mind is in the mode of entanglement or freedom? That is known by the way we deal with the senses and the ego. So when we are in constant, relentless pursuit of personal sense gratification, meeting the needs of the body and the mind, never get satiated and always want more. So when there is elements of calm that is coming from the senses, so you can think of it as 2 broad ways. One in the way of senses, then which will activate the calm or the desire, and the other is when there is identification with the ego, when there is activation of distinctiveness. So I am different, I am higher than other individuals. So that abhiman and ahankar, when it comes in, that is representing ego. So if we can diminish the sensual gratification pursuit and this distinction of the ego, then our mind becomes impure, because there is nothing in the outside external world to contemplate about. So that is the whole point of making work nishkam karma, which we say activities without pursuit of some fruitive activities, or activities not seeking rewards, and the sthit pragya, which is stoic, not getting angry, upset, desirous, greedy, things of that nature. So when you have killed the sensual gratification as well as the ego, then the mind will become pure. What happens in the pure state? So in the pure state, there is nothing else in the exterior to contemplate on. Very minimal thought processes, right? So when there is nothing to contemplate on the exterior, where does the mind focus? On the interior, on the self. So that is the state, whether you think about the 8 limbs of Ashtanga Yoga, where the end last 4 are Pratyahara, Dharana, Dhyana and Samadhi, Dhyan or meditation, contemplation. So those 4 are in the higher loops. The four lower loops, of course, are Yam, Niyam, Yoga and Pranayam. But in the pure state, since you're not thinking about the body and the sensual gratification of the senses, you are thinking about the self. So that is the contemplation on the self. And Amrit Bindu constantly, and even Brihadaranyaka Upanishad constantly mentions the location of the Atman or the consciousness within the heart, if you will. So there's obviously this is my more like a medical heart, not the beetle leaf shaped heart, as you know, because of my background. But basically, this is my visualization or dharana, if you will, based on what Amrit Bindu Upanishad and Brihadaranyaka Upanishad will say about the consciousness. So only when you are able to get rid of the senses and the ego, the mind is able to become pure, which is to signify it is sinking in the heart, restrained by the heart, as the word is, niruddha. So when it is contained by the heart. So even Brihadaranyaka Upanishad will say, Bhidyate hridaya granthis chindante sarva sanshaya chiyanti chasya karmani tasmin drishte paravare, which means once when you close your eyes and you have visualized the self in the heart, that is the moment when you have attained and realized the self, and then there is the expansion and acknowledgement of the abounding consciousness. So that is how you make the mind pure, by sinking the restrained mind or pratyahara, which is restriction of various things. As you know, Gita will repeatedly say, yuktahar viharasya yukteshtasya karmsu yukt swapna bodhasya yogo bhavati dukha. So people have to be restrained in eating, recreation, sleeping, all the activities, very limited. Not going to one extreme and definitely not going to the extreme of gluttony and overdoing things. So that is why the middle path, and mostly trying to disengage from the senses to get to the mind. So the second question is, what is consciousness? Of course, we talked about the mind, and then it talks about the heart, where the consciousness is lying. So the consciousness, according to Amrit Bindu Upanishad, it follows more of the Advaita philosophy, which is the single bounded philosophy. And I will use three strong analogies here based on the teachings of Amrit Bindu. The first one is the moon pot analogy. The second one is the pot space analogy. And the third one is self-enquiry, which can be said as either the fire turning into wood analogy, or milk being churned into butter analogy, which is basically activation. Self-enquiry causes activation of the consciousness. So let's take a look at all these three, which are dealing with basically the consciousness. So the first one is the moon pot analogy, in which Amrit Bindu says, moon shining in the sky, lots of pots sitting here on planet Earth and filled with water. In each of the pots, you can see the reflection of the moon. So it is, although a single moon, it is being reflected and seen within multiple pots. And if you increase the number of pots, you will still see the same. So the character of the moonlight, or the moon as it is shining in the pots, is same as the moon in the cosmic sky. So that's the analogy they use to say that Atman is same as the Brahman. So that is the first analogy, where you have this huge pot, and in this pot you have this reflection filled with water, obviously, but there is reflection of the moon, if you will, and that is can be seen in the pot. Now if there are multiple pots, there will be multiple reflections. So that is the Atman, or the consciousness, being reflected of the moon or the Brahman. Now the second one is the pot space analogy. If I move this pot in space to a different place, the pot has been moved, not the space in which the pot is contained. And that is a very strong analogy, which also comes in Gita. Yatha akashchito nityam vayu sarvatrago mahan tatha sarvani bhutani shloka, where he says that in this akasha is suspended the air element. So like air will blow around, but it will still be within the space. Similarly, the pot will be moved around, it will be still within the space. The implication is this whole space in which the pot is suspended represents the eternal cosmic consciousness, and the pot represents the body. So this is the ether of consciousness all over, and whatever the mind is doing, it is just containing and recognizing that particular portion of the consciousness by contemplation. But when you break the body, which is basically saying death happens and then reincarnation happens, you attain a new portion of consciousness, but still it is suspended within the same consciousness. So the implication is bodies with the mind are going to capture only a certain portion of consciousness. When you have restrained the mind and you have kind of concentrated on the self, then there is attainment or expansion and realization of the entire spectrum of the consciousness. So it's a very, very subtle but very strong analogy to understand how the Atman itself is the Brahman once it has realized itself. So that is the pot space analogy. The third one is self-inquiry analogy, and Ramana Maharishi uses it a lot of times. Whenever a thought arises to you, whether it is of lust, anger, greed, you have to ask, to whom does this thought arise? Similarly, Amrit Bindu says you have to think about your body or your mind as the conduit that will help you recognize the Atman or the consciousness that is lying inside you. So that is why you have to focus and center it down in your heart, because that's where the Atman is residing very subtly. So in the self-inquiry, he says, just like butter is contained in the milk, but unless you churn it, you're not going to get the butter out of it. Similarly, the consciousness of Brahman is contained within you, but unless you churn the mind with meditation and aspects and tools of self-realization, which I will say basically will be first is to say that I am not the mind, I am not the body, I am beyond and more than the body, so I am the Atman. That is the first one. And second is, of course, negating the personal sense gratification activities that our mind wants to do, eat the second cookie or be more lazy and be more procrastinating. So anything that is making you go for the extremes, yuktahar vihar rasya concept, that has to be abdicated. So that is giving up personal sense gratification and identification of the Atman by killing the ego. So basically it's the same as the 1-2 we had talked here. So when you churn the mind by saying that I am not the body and the sensual gratification that I am engaging in are needs of the body and not the needs of the perpetual eternal individual that is inside me, the Atman, then you are able to get the butter, then you are able to get the consciousness. Similarly, like a firewood stick, if you rub it very vigorously, the fire comes out. Otherwise, the stick is there, you are not afraid of it, nothing it does, but the moment it catches fire, everybody is like, oh my god, this is magical. So we have to constantly churn our mind with self-inquiry in meditation, and it also uses the word Om, because Om is the conduit. So Om, when you're concentrating on it in the 8 limbs of yoga, you are on number 5 dharana, and the moment you say Om, the end of it, that is the unmanifested Brahman. So the manifested Brahman is Om, unmanifest is the end of it, and that is the eternal unchanging world of the cosmic Brahman. So that's why you can start meditating on the word Om or use the dharana or picture. That's why they say you cannot go directly into Samadhi or number 8 or Dhyan meditation number 7 of Ashtanga. You have to start with Pratyahara, which is imagination or vocal vibrations of Om, or even before like Pranayam, or even before like Yogasana or Yam and Niyam, which please watch my video on 8 limbs Ashtanga Yoga to know the details. So to sum it up, my friends, Amrit Bindu Upanishad establishes the connection of the mind with the consciousness. When the mind is pure, it is ready for moksha or liberation or self-realization. To make the mind pure, you have to negate and abdicate personal sense gratification activities, the kama inside you and the krodha inside you, which is denoting the ego. Personal sense gratification is denoting the egos or the indriyas or the senses. So kill that distinction, kill the anger, kill the calm or the desire of senses. And third is, once you have killed these external distractions, the mind is ready to focus on the self or the cosmic consciousness of Brahman, which is sitting as the Atman. But once you are contemplating on the self through self-inquiry, you have killed the external thoughts, created a field of neutrality in which the mind will be able to see the Atman and the consciousness, and then there will be an experience of the bliss. Even if you are not able to get to the extreme stage, I have realized that if you constantly meditate, it makes you more happy, it makes you more content, it makes you a better individual in terms of relationships with your friends and family. So definitely Amrit Bindu Upanishad has a lot to offer, and I hope you like this lecture. If you have any thoughts, please leave your comments below. Thank you. Thank you.